Look, what we just witnessed at the Supreme Court was not just your standard run-of-the-mill oral argument. It was something visceral. It was the moment actual panic started to set in for the conservative legal movement. I call it the uh-oh moment. These justices, they have spent their entire careers building this Frankenstein monster of legal theory, this idea of the unitary executive, of total presidential control. And now, they are watching in real time as the monster turns around and threatens to tear down the very house they live in. Take a look at Brett Kavanaugh. Here is a guy who was practically lab-grown in the Federalist Society ecosystem. He has spent his entire professional life championing the idea that the president should have absolute control over the executive branch. In a law school classroom or a theoretical debate, that sounds very tidy. It sounds constitutional. But then you introduce the variable of reality. You introduce Donald Trump. And when you hand that kind of theoretical weapon to a malignant narcissist, the whole equation blows up. You could see it on Kavanaugh's face. He is sitting there listening to John Sauer, Trump's lawyer, and Sauer is standing there with that rasp, arguing that Trump can fire Lisa Cook from the Federal Reserve Board just by uttering the magic words for cause. And here is the terrifying part. Sauer is telling them the president does not need to prove the cause exists. He does not need evidence. He does not need a hearing. He just needs to make the accusation, and that is it. It is the will of the king. And right there, the gears in Kavanaugh's head started grinding in reverse. He is looking at the clock. He is looking at the calendar. He realizes it is a midterm year. And the question screaming in his brain is not about the Constitution. It is about political survival. He is thinking, wait a minute. If we sign off on this, what happens when a Democrat takes the oath of office in 2028 or 2032? Imagine the scenario, and I know for a fact Kavanaugh is imagining it. A progressive Democrat walks into the Oval Office. They look at the Federal Reserve Board, which is stacked with Republican appointees, and they say, you know what? I think your views on climate change are outdated. I think your failure to prioritize green energy and monetary policy constitutes inefficiency or neglect of duty. That is my cause. You are fired. If the Supreme Court sets the precedent today that Donald Trump can decapitate the Fed based on a trumped-up pretext, there is absolutely nothing stopping a future Democratic president from doing the exact same thing to purge conservatives. That is their nightmare scenario. Kavanaugh effectively said this out loud during the argument. He pushed back against Sauer, basically saying, look, John, the opinion we write today is going to be the law for everybody, not just for Donald Trump. They cannot write a ruling that says, this power applies only to Trump because we like him. The law does not work that way, much as they might wish it did. Sauer, of course, tried to hand-wave it away. He said, oh, we will deal with those hypotheticals when they arise. But Kavanaugh is not naive. He knows that once you open Pandora's box, you cannot close it. Trump's Department of Justice is arguing that the courts have no authority to review the president's reasons, that the executive branch is a law unto itself. Sound familiar? That is the language of authoritarianism, not a constitutional republic. Let us drill down into this whole for cause argument. Under current law and precedent, for independent agencies like the Fed, the president cannot just fire people because he feels like it. There has to be a reason. Inefficiency, neglect of duty, malfeasance. But Trump, with the instinct of a career con man, thinks he found a loophole. He is saying, fine, you want a reason? I will give you a reason. I will accuse Lisa Cook of mortgage fraud. It is laughable. It is offensive. The whole world, and I mean everyone, knows this is a lie. Donald Trump wakes up lying. He eats lunch and lies. He goes to bed lying. The man is a pathological liar. The idea that he is deeply morally concerned about a clerical error on a mortgage application from years ago is as ridiculous as believing he cares about reading the Constitution. He does not. He wants to fire Lisa Cook because he wants to control interest rates. He wants to turn the Federal Reserve into a political arm of his campaign to juice the economy for short-term gain, even if it causes hyperinflation and ruins the country in the long run. And this creates an impossible dilemma for Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, and the rest of the conservative bloc. They know he is lying. They know the mortgage fraud excuse is garbage. But their legal philosophy requires them to assume the president acts in good faith. Courts generally do not psychoanalyze the president's motives. But how do you maintain a presumption of good faith when the subject is Donald Trump, a man whose entire existence is bad faith? Sauer stood there, with a straight face, arguing that a mistake on a loan application is a heinous crime that undermines the financial markets. Nobody in that courtroom believed him. Nobody. Everyone knows this is a policy dispute dressed up in a fake scandal. But if the court accepts this, they are officially legalizing the idea that a president can fabricate crimes to purge his political enemies from independent agencies. So what is really scaring the Supreme Court here? It is not justice for Lisa Cook. Let us not kid ourselves. They are terrified for the markets. They are terrified for the economy. The Federal Reserve is not the EPA or the Department of Education. It is the beating heart of the global financial system. The independence of the Fed is the only thing that gives the world confidence in the US dollar. If global investors start thinking that American interest rates are being set by the mood swings of a lunatic in the White House rather than by economic data, they will pull their money. The stock market will crash. Inflation will spiral. Your 401k vaporized. Kavanaugh and these conservative justices might be partisans, but they are not stupid. They understand money. They have investment portfolios. They know that you do not mess with the stability of the financial system just to stroke Donald Trump's ego. That is the red line. They might look the other way on a lot of things, but they are not going to let him burn down the economy that they benefit from. That is why I am telling you, Trump is likely going to lose this. Kavanaugh signaled it loud and clear. He is asking himself if they are shooting themselves in the foot. If they hand the executive this absolute weapon, they are forging the sword that will be used to slay them in the future. It is a cold, cynical political calculation. It is not a moral awakening, but it leads to the same result. And you have to look at the bigger picture. This Lisa Cook case does not exist in a vacuum. It is the direct blowback from that disastrous absolute immunity ruling this same court handed down. They gave Trump a shield. They told him he is a king, that he is above the law. And now they are shocked that he is acting like one. When you tell a narcissist he has absolute immunity, what does he do? He tests every fence. He pushes every boundary. He tries to fire everyone. The fact that Trump is demanding this unlimited firing power is the inevitable consequence of the Supreme Court coddling him for years. Look at Brazil. Harry Litman made the comparison, and he is spot on. What did the Brazilian Supreme Court do when their former president tried to stage a coup? They threw him in prison, 20 years. When he looked like he might flee or collude with foreign actors, they locked him up immediately. Boom, done. That is a judicial system defending democracy. And here, what did our Supreme Court do? They overruled the lower courts to hand Trump immunity. They betrayed the founding principle of this nation. We were founded on the idea that we have no king, that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And now, as Trump stands before them demanding the power to purge the Federal Reserve, you can see the sweat on their brows. They are trying to cover their tracks. I genuinely believe this entire Supreme Court term is a desperate attempt at damage control for that immunity ruling. They are using the shadow docket, expedited orders without full opinions, to stay Trump's policies without having to formally rule on the merits. They are trying to stall. They want to kick the can down the road, hoping Trump leaves office so they can eventually write some lofty opinion condemning executive overreach, pretending they were the guardians of the Constitution all along. It is cowardice, pure and simple. They do not want to confront the monster they helped create. In this Cook case, you heard Justice Alito whining, asking, why are we rushing? Why is the record so undeveloped? Why? Because you guys intervened. You used your emergency powers to take this case and issue a stay. You created this mess, and now you are complaining about the smell. Lisa Cook did not even get proper notice. Due process was thrown out the window to accommodate Trump's tantrum, and the court went along with it until they saw the price tag. But ultimately, it comes back to the lie. Our legal system is not designed to handle a president who lies as effortlessly and constantly as Donald Trump. Judges are trained to respect the text, to respect official government statements. When the Department of Justice says the reason is X, the court accepts it as X. But with Trump, X is actually Y or Z or nothing at all. Kavanaugh knows it, Gorsuch knows it, Roberts knows it, but they cannot write in an opinion, "We reject the president's argument because he is a liar." They cannot say that because it shatters the polite fiction of interbranch respect. So they have to find another way out. They have to cling to arguments about process, about precedent, about future risks to their own side. They have to protect the Federal Reserve. Not because they care about Lisa Cook's career, but because they worship the capitalist stability she represents. They know that if Trump turns the Fed into his personal playground, it is game over. It is ironic, is it not? These conservatives spent decades tearing down regulations, weakening the administrative state, trying to give the president more power. And now that they have won, now that they have a Republican president wielding that ultimate power, they are terrified. They are realizing that the unitary executive theory only works if the person in charge is sane and moral. When you hand it to a demagogue with no bottom, it becomes a suicide pact. Kavanaugh is staring into the abyss. He realizes that if he does not stop Trump here on this issue of the Fed, there are no guardrails left. If for cause means because I said so, then administrative law is dead. The rule of law is dead. So, do not be surprised when you see these Trump-appointed justices turn on him in this case. It is not because they found their souls. It is self-preservation. They want to protect their own power and the safety of the system they sit atop. Trump is a threat to that stability, and even his most reluctant allies on the court are starting to realize that the cost of blind loyalty is just too high. In short, it is a tragicomedy, but a dangerous one. We have a lying president, a lawyer debasing himself to defend the lie with twisted logic, and a bench of justices sweating because they realize they handed a box of matches to an arsonist. Our only hope right now is that their fear of a future Democratic president forces them to do the right thing today. It is politics, not law. But at this point, I will take whatever guardrail we can get to stop this insanity from crashing the economy.